Rewind-A-Dynamite from the post-wrestling site. AEW, lighting up the fuse. Sit back and enjoy the bubbly as we hear from John and Wai Ting. Where we're going, we don't need roads. And if the buck stops here, this thing might blow. Everything you hear are opinions of the show. And if you don't like it, go to the forums and let them know.
Hello, everybody. It is. Where are we hearing this from?
I don't know.
Hello, everybody. Oh, you know what? I think I have one too many things open here.
It's that second monitor. Damn it!
It's. You know what?
Screwing everything up. What's going on here?
One too many. How's that? Oh my God. Sorry. I didn't know what was going on there.
There's way too much technology for your own.
Oh,
good.
dude, I can't even keep track of, like, I'm not one of the big tabs persons, but now it's just.
And you were thinking of getting a fourth monitor.
Yeah, that just can't happen for many reasons. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, not so bad.
Okay, well, that's good.
How are you?
Great. Were you outside today?
No, I wasn't actually. It's cold.
The weirdest day. Okay, this morning it was actually really nice. We had a range today in Celsius, folks.
Mm-hmm.
The true temperature.
Really, the only way you should be measuring temperature.
So we had a high today of like 14 and a low of -5. That's what the day progressed.
Really strange.
It was crazy. Like this morning, like I got out like my spring jacket, and then I went out in the afternoon. I'm like, dude, it is freezing out here. I had to put my winter jacket back on. But that's a big variance for one day.
Huge. How do you prepare for that?
You can't.
You stuff a winter jacket inside your backpack, maybe?
You just give up to the weather.
You stay inside.
That's it. You do that indeed. Well, everyone, welcome to the show. Sit back. We have a lot to discuss tonight from Dynamite in Huntsville, Alabama. Ever been?
I can't say I have. I've been to Huntsville, Ontario.
Me too. Yes.
Anything like it?
It's far. It's very far.
Okay. Yes.
I've driven there. It's a long drive.
Mm-hmm.
Anything memorable in Huntsville, Ontario for you?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay.
Cottage country. I believe.
Yeah. It's fine. It's a city.
It's great. It's wonderful.
Yeah. I don't have much to say. I don't have any strong memories of Huntsville, Ontario.
All right.
This is what you've tuned in for tonight, everyone. You are here for the very best analysis money can buy. We have lots to discuss. We are going to start off with the passing of Mike Jones, who was best known as Virgil, had many different characters throughout his career. Wai, when you hear about Virgil, what do you think about?
Ooh, what a big question. What a loaded question. I mean, there's a lot. Obviously in recent years, you think about Lonely Virgil, you think about Olive Garden, you think about F Money, and a lot of fun, honestly, that really kind of came with this man's embracing of his online persona. But when you think about his, bigger career, of course, you think about the run with $1 Million Man, you think about the $1 Million Championship, and maybe even a little bit of Vincent in the NWO.
I mean, the guy found himself in some pretty significant periods of pro wrestling history. I would never go so far as to say that this man was a cornerstone of either of these companies, but I mean, he started. It's interesting because his birth date has, been up in question today with what Wikipedia has listed, but I tend to lean towards the profile that Slam Wrestling did a few years ago on him, where the roommate he was living with, like a close friend of his, had confirmed it to be April 7th, 1951. So if you're going with that date, like, think about that. This guy isn't getting into wrestling until his mid-30s, if that age checks out. It's not like he's getting into this young. And I mean, he pretty much started with WWF and then is immediately sent to Memphis. And that's where he wrestles for a period of time as Soul Train Jones. And he's only there about 4 or 5 months. But during that time, I mean, he teamed with Rocky Johnson. They had a run with the tag titles there. Even had an AWA title match with Nick Bockwinkel. So if you woke up today thinking, man, did Nick Bockwinkel and Virgil ever have a match for the AWA heavyweight title? They did indeed. And then he is brought back to WWF, and he is his first kind of formal character is Lucius Brown, which didn't have quite the staying power, but then is repackaged as Virgil, the bodyguard for Ted DiBiase, which was the character that famously, like, this was Vince McMahon's idea of, if I was going to be a character, this would be it. And Ted DiBiase was this incredible creation of the company, and Virgil was the lackey for him. And they did all of these vignettes, many that, I mean, very heavily like racial overtones to them as well, with the just the dynamic here of this rich, white, wealthy individual with his black bodyguard doing all of these demeaning tasks. But he was the constant throughout that period, involved in all the big $1 Million Man angles, from the main event when Andre beat Hogan for the title and tried to buy the title off of Andre the Giant to set up WrestleMania 4. And then it ran its course, and then they did the turn in 91 where he finally turned on him. And it was a significant turn that the audience got into, because this had not just been some pairing for a couple of months and then you break them up. It was years that you had seen this guy just under the thumb of Ted DiBiase. So you go back to that period, and not to say they were like these mind-blowing matches or anything, but Ted DiBiase was tremendous worker at the time, and Virgil was a very over babyface for that period. They put him with Roddy Piper sort of as his mouthpiece. So I would look at the peak of his career as that 91 run that he got with DiBiase. They did WrestleMania that year. They did SummerSlam, and they were married to each other on the road. Like, they just worked all year long in all the cities together. And the rest of his run, like, he was in the company through 94, and pretty much just a prelim to mid-card babyface that would work against the heels and, get the occasional television win here or there, but was kind of a undercard player. And then leaves the company in 94, and he's on the independents, pops up in WCW in 1996. And of course, Virgil, being the name that everyone just assumed was their little poke at Dusty Rhodes, Virgil Runnels. So he goes to WCW, and now he is Vincent. So this is when this man is realizing, okay, I'm going to have longevity in this industry, but I am going to be like the punchline. And he would become Vincent, later Shane. He ran the gamut of different names.
He certainly did. Yeah, one of the many names I think attached to the NWO that you might have considered one too many. That might have certainly watered down the brand.
And he was one of the earlier additions too. It's not like they were at like 15 when they added him. I mean, they were still at the I would say the compact level of NWO, because he's there in 96 when it's still a relatively fresh character. I mean, one thing you can say about this guy, whether you're looking at him in 1988 or 1998, I mean, dude didn't age a day. So it's why I can believe such a variance of what his age could have been. Because even, I mean, he had been in some poor health the last few years, and you had seen him really start to age. But I would say even a decade ago, you looked at him, it's not like this man had aged greatly over the course of these 35 years or so.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm just pointing this out. The man had a lot of staying power, and was part of the NWO. It was sort of, I wouldn't say anything too memorable that he was in. Then they put him in the West Texas Rednecks. As we mentioned, Shane. I completely have a blank spot of this guy in 2000 when he was with Ernest Miller as Mr. Jones, and then replaced by Ms. Jones, who I very clearly remember and had no clue that this was the replacement for Mr. Jones. There's only so much of WCW 2000 that I'm going to retain, and this, I trust that it happened.
I read that in your bio today, and I certainly had no recollection of it. I'm sure there are a lot of notes in this man's career that.
Do you remember him coming back with Ted DiBiase Jr. in 2010 in WWE?
No, not really.
I certainly did not come to mind. I did remember it when I watched the clips today. They tried to put him with Ted DiBiase Jr., but it was only to serve as he would be fired and replaced by Maurice. And that led to the historic pairing of Ted DiBiase Jr. and Maurice, which had chemistry that, I mean, to this day, we look back on as the prototype for a male-female dynamic of a heel. Really something that they were able to accomplish together. Could have used Virgil for that run. But that was kind of his last appearance with WWE. And in recent years, I mean, this guy would just notoriously, he would show up at conventions, whether invited or not, just set up his table. He would be selling his 8x10s anywhere and everywhere, from shows to conventions to subways, and did a bunch of appearances for GCW, including their pay-per-view 2 years ago. And this is probably going to be the image that many attach with him, wrestling superstar Virgil at a very quiet convention.
I mean, at this point, almost like an iconic photo. And I mean, I don't know what his immediate reaction to maybe learning about this meme would have been, but the man has certainly embraced it in many recent years.
I mean, this photo you pulled up is a signed copy, is it not? So, I mean, hey, you got $20, he's going to sign just about anything for you. But
yeah, and when I think about Virgil, especially in recent years, I do more so think about a bit of a resurgence he's had in relevance, you know, for a modern fan base who, whether or not, you know, knowing him through the notoriety of a meme like this, found a new enjoyment, I think, out of just how the man started to employ a different persona online. And according to that Slam article that you mentioned previously, John, we know that he had nothing really to do with it. I mean, he had as much to do with the social media as the Iron Sheik did, you know, with his. Nonetheless, hopefully at least it provided maybe a little bit of money for the man, you know, towards his latter years. Certainly in video appearances, it gave him a few bookings, you know, that made him again fun to watch and gave us a lot of entertainment.
Yeah, I mean, he really had his problems the last few years. A couple of years ago, he had 2 small strokes, and he was also dealing with dementia. Slam also did a story today, and his sister had stated to them, like, the stories of him having cancer were not true. But he was dealing with other issues as well. I know they did a GoFundMe for him at one point, I think it was around the time he had the strokes as well. So, I mean, you know, it was someone that was still trying to just carve out some form of income through professional wrestling. And I never like to look at that as, you know, stuff for comedy that I know Virgil really leaned into as well. You hear a lot of stories with Virgil from, you know, a lot of the independent talent that was around him seemed to have a lot of just like fun stories around him, as opposed to this guy that was, it was sort of like this guy, whether he was in or not, of the joke, it seemed to be he very much leaned into it as well, and realized like that is his connection to this industry. And that was sort of what he set out to do, and do the convention circuit and try and just, you know, for a guy that has not been on national television for over 20 years.
Yeah, had a brief AEW. I don't know if you'd even call it run, but
he did the Inner Circle stuff as well, which I recall being like, it was like some entertaining cameos that he did, and he did a few of them with AEW. You're right.
Yeah, it's troubling to maybe hear about some of the details of his dementia, you know, towards the latter stages of his life, and, you know, hope, especially like what maybe a flirtation with homelessness as well. You know, it again maybe calls to question how much we're taking care of our people who have had, you know, earlier careers in this industry. But hopefully he, you know, wasn't suffering too bad towards these last few years.
So our condolences to Mike Jones, best known as Virgil. Next story is one that I think we assumed was a formality, and that is Billy Jack Haynes, who has now been charged with second-degree murder. And this in regards to the February 28th death of his wife, Jeanette. Multiple news organizations out of Oregon have reported that he was released from hospital on Wednesday. He had been hospitalized after this kind of standoff with police when the death occurred, and was hospitalized with injuries that were unrelated to the incident, and had been in there since February the 8th. And now he has been booked in the county detention center on second-degree murder charge and unlawful use of a weapon. His wife, Jeanette, was 85 years old, and her death has been ruled a homicide by a gunshot wound. And he is set to appear in court on Thursday. So we'll see how this moves forward, in the sense of, is this guy even going to be someone that can stand trial? I think that would be the first question, because certainly these charges, very well, if found guilty, could be looking at the rest of his life in jail.
Very, very dark story. I hope justice is served.
Matt Riddle was on the MMA Hour on Wednesday with Ariel Helwani, and was in studio. This is in, he was promoting the MLW shows that he is working on Thursday night in New York, and discussed his exit from the WWE. He kind of, addressed everything. He didn't go too much. He never mentioned Samantha Tavil by name, but I mean, the guy's pretty adamant that these were false allegations against him. And, he talked, in bits about the incident at JFK Airport, but also mentioned the failed drug test that he had in WWE. And he explained that this would have been in 2022. He admitted to going to a strip club and doing cocaine. And then the way the drug testing was in WWE was, he said you would get tested either at the end of the month, beginning of the month. And in his case, it was both. So this was kind of like Brock Lesnar after UFC 200, where he got tested twice within a close enough period that the same substance showed up both times. And cocaine can live in your system for about 30 days or so. So it was the case of having two tests that came back positive with cocaine. And so technically, though, that is two drug test failures. And he ended up getting suspended. And he went clean for 10 weeks, he said, then went out and quote unquote partied and failed another drug test, which would be number 3, which when the
was that also for cocaine?
He just said partied and tested positive. So you can make that assumption. And then that's what led to him going to rehab per the request of the company. And he did 30 days in rehab, and then they wanted him to do another 30 days. And this is all when he disappears from television at the end of 2022. And so I guess he gets a little break. He goes home for like a week or something, and then goes back and does the other 30 days. And that's shortly before he gets let go in 2023. But that is kind of his story of, his drug test failures. And I mean, it does bring into question there was a time that the wellness policy used to be public, and for people that are maybe were not following at that time, like the company used to publicly announce every failure. They never do that anymore, but it was always like 3 strikes and you're gone from the company. Now it's obviously to their discretion. And I think we have seen adjustments to the wellness policy over the years, but that was the case with Matt Riddle. And
it's also a case of what is beneficial for the company's public profile. That all those announcements came at a time when I think they really wanted to make sure the audience and the public knew that they were testing people in the wake of Benoit and everything. And
Eddie,
and publicizing the fact that you are testing very sort of strictly and suspending people was good PR. And then it maybe got to a point where announcing suspensions became bad PR. And I suppose we're in that space right now.
Yeah. I don't know how much more you go into the allegations against him, other than, I mean, he was very adamant that these were not true. And also later, he did note the fact that he doesn't have any, this was in relation to talking about the Vince McMahon stuff, that he doesn't have any NDAs out because he's never needed to have any NDAs. So, I mean, if that was a question that people had, if you recall, Samantha Tavil filed her suit and then dropped it about a year later. I mean, that was just a line that Matt Riddle put in there, that there are no NDAs out there. If anyone was, curious about if she would be allowed to speak about anything. There was also this line, and this again was in relation when they were talking about the Vince McMahon story. And I wanted to play the clip so you hear it in the context that he delivered it. But this was Ariel asking him about Vince McMahon and if people in the locker room, if there were whispers about Janelle Grant, if people were aware of things that were going on. And this is Matt Riddle's answer, and we'll react to it after.
Was this something that, like, did you ever hear about this relationship, or were there ever talks of it, whispers, rumors about him doing stuff like this? Even some of the other accusations, like, did the boys in the back know about this?
I've never heard anything about Vince. I've seen certain people, I'm not going to mention names, but I've seen certain people make passes at certain female talent by saying, come to my locker room, or et cetera, kind of like that creepy kind of thing. And at least the woman I talked to didn't go and was above that. She's a stallion and was like, I'm not doing that. But like, here's my number, come to my locker room. Now, and that's where it ended, but it could have escalated. Sure. And if that person was in fear of their job or wasn't as over as they are, they probably would have went there because they didn't, what am I supposed to do? Damn, I probably would have went there. Like, I just need the job.
Okay, so the comment there that, I mean, you do have to, we're not going to speculate here, but the way that reads is that this was not just like a talent, hitting on another female. It sounded like this was, someone above that this would be, in terms of if this person were not secure enough in their push or character about their job. I mean, it kind of paints the picture of somebody in some level of power here, headline or hitting on a female talent. And I mean, this is, it just kind of raises that question as well about how prevalent this was, involving individuals who had some influence and women in the locker room.
I'm gonna have to maybe listen to the entire interview, maybe with a bit more of a closer ear before I can feel like I have anything constructive to maybe add to it.
Yeah.
At this point, it sounds like a lot of information was gone through in this particular interview. And
it's like an hour,
and
open. It's a lot of different, and it's Matt Riddle, who is just going in many different directions through all of this. So if you do want to hear it, it is out on today's show. On the WWE talent front, so the Wrestling Observer newsletter is reporting that Tama Tonga looks to be headed towards WWE. And we also had the return of Shawn Spears on Tuesday night's NXT program. And what did you think about these two additions to the WWE roster? Shawn Spears at the NXT level, Tama Tonga to be determined.
I think, in Tama Tonga's case, somebody we've been expecting with, the OC going to NXT. It seems all but set up for his arrival. And I think maybe myself and maybe a lot of people thought these three faces vignettes were directly leading to Tama Tonga coming into the company. It turns out they were for Shawn Spears. That was one that was, I think, a bit more surprising for me, because even though I knew we knew Shawn Spears was had exited AEW. I don't know if I saw NXT as a destination for him, just given the fact that he is a bit older at this point.
It's 43.
How much?
43.
43. I mean, he's also been a project of theirs that they've kind of tried and didn't necessarily succeed with. But thinking about it a bit more, he probably offers a lot as a veteran down there to be able to help a lot of the younger talent that's there, to help build a lot of the other talent, maybe in ways that we aren't even going to be able to see on screen. So
and whether there's a coaching position that he's going to be filling as well, that's a question here. Yeah, when you look at, I would say at both of them, I mean, it does tell you about sort of the mindset, because Tama Tonga himself, he's 41. These are not people that have, they have significant careers behind them already. For a Spears, I think that someone like that in NXT, I don't think there's any harm in having that veteran presence down there with a lot of the talent that you're talking about. But at Tama Tonga as well, it does tell you a mindset of, 40 is not that used to be the number that, Vince McMahon would just kind of shy away from guys. When Hogan hit 40, when Savage hit 40, it used to be that was when Brett ended up, leaving the company when he was 40. That used to be the age that it was sort of on, time to de-emphasize guys. And certainly don't see that mindset now when it comes. Not that Tama Tonga is coming in and is probably going to be a headline guy, but nonetheless, there's a lot of talent that they have, and they are making a spot for a Tama Tonga.
I feel like there's maybe a realization that you can't simply build NXT around youth, around NIL athletes, and you need a lot of veteran presence in order to maybe build those younger athletes around, and also to maybe maintain NXT sort of I don't know, former status as like mini super indie that attracts a lot of like the sort of buzzed about talents that are free agents out there. Not necessarily saying either is that we're talking about fits within those sort of parameters, but I think they're willing to at least give everybody a chance. And I think at least putting Tama Tonga with the OC, there is going to be Bullet Club sort of nostalgia out there for somebody. Okay, as little as I think it might exist for us, somebody might still get excited at any sort of tease of like, hey, this, like
Can't wait.
Yeah. If there's a story to be told, then why not?
We'll quickly go through the ratings. So Saturday night was Collision, and not a good number at all for Collision. Second lowest of the year, only behind the Royal Rumble night. 385,000 viewers and a 0.11 in the demo. So they were down 22%. This was from 2 weeks ago because they did not have a show the week prior. And down 29% in 18 to 49. But in adults 18 to 34 from 2 weeks ago, they were down 52%. So with due respect to Jun Akiyama, he was not bringing in the 18 to 34-year-old males or females. Surprisingly, the one demo that did grow was men 35 to 49, which grew 9%. And yeah, this was not a great number, and this would continue the pattern that just because the WWE show is not running head to head, just being on the same day, I think it's still going to have an impact on people that they might watch the show, and that's their fill for the day. And I'm very curious for what April 6th has in store for Collision. That's going to be a very tough night for AEW, but it's one night, but it is coming up. Raw on Monday did 1,738,000 viewers and a 0.57, lowest audience since January the 22nd. So naturally, they were up in Canada. Peak segment was 9 to 9:15, which it did have a Cody backstage segment, but not a significant point of the show that you would have even known. It was largely this Imperium Judgment Day segment that ended up getting up to 1,950,000 viewers. So, I mean, Gunther, confirmed Raw.
Oh, of course, yes. How much does it have to do with current competition? Like, what's Raw's biggest competition on TV right now?
I mean, their biggest competition on Monday nights. I mean, they will it's the NBA. It's whatever sports is going on. Like, this is a relatively calmer sports calendar for WWE at this point. It's also the 9 to 9:15 segment, which is a pretty good quarter traditionally for WWE. NXT has really cooled off of late. They were down to 570,000 viewers and a 0.16. So this was their lowest audience since the 4th of July, lowest 18 to 49 since August, and they were 10th on cable. So, I mean, this has coincided. There's a lot less of, who's the main roster talent that's going to show up every week, but you could never rely on that permanently either. But this is at a time when you're traditionally building up for your big show, and you do have this program in Carmelo Hayes and Trick Williams, but this is not just a 1 week thing. Like, NXT has kind of settled at this particular level. And the last thing was the A&E specials on the weekend on Sunday. The Randy Orton bio, 377,000 viewers, 0.11, and the Rivals episode between Triple H and The Rock, 351,000 and a 0.07. I did get to see the Randy Orton piece, and it was a very interesting view on Randy Orton and a lot concerning his drug abuse and overdosing, which is a story it's been out there, but I don't think he's ever spoken about it in such detail as well. But that's, it's a story of a guy who was, the story of like this guy who has all this talent in the world, but has been self-destructive, and it's been his second wife that he has met, and this latter part of his career that he has been able to get his head on straight. But Wait, I know you are always a fan of the WWE B-roll of stories and finding clips that match the story. There is an unbelievable one where Jim Cornette is explaining that this guy was not popular in OVW, where he would just say, I'm just here for the money. Dude, they find a workout tape in OVW where Randy is off camera and they have it subtitled, and you hear him literally saying off camera, I'm just here to get my money. And the clip that they dug up here, and when they're talking about Randy Orton not being great with fans, dude, they shoot all these guys for all these autograph sessions, and they just got a bunch of like him just being an asshole to fans. It's remarkable to watch just the production of a WWE piece where, to me, the peak was still like the Hardys being caught on camera, pretty much talking about drug use and them just holding on to this clip and then using it later. But this one was like when they pulled out this clip from like the Davis Arena, it's just like, Jesus Christ. Like it feels like you are monitored 24/7 by this company. Like, don't ever say something in their auspices and not think it's being recorded or filmed somewhere.
Well, I'd love to know what the cataloging system might be for, whatever intern they've had in the past go through these tapes and log every single term, so that when you type in, I don't know, Hardy Boys and substances, something like that might come up here. I mean, that's a lot of credit to the production. It sounds like these are, at this point, maybe our versions or the modern day versions of what we used to get through the DVDs.
Yeah, it is. Only now, like, we sell them to other networks. So, I mean, that's the advantageous part for them. So I think they're doing Sergeant Slaughter this weekend. And
so worth watching this series is what you're saying.
I mean, I didn't watch Rivals, but I watched the Legends biography. I think it's going to be contingent on the subject. Sergeant Slaughter could be a really entertaining one. I mean, they have all the Mid-Atlantic footage of him. And there's, to me, I'm much more interested in the pre Iraqi sympathizer angle of Slaughter's career, because I think that's a more under-focused part of his AWA run, his first WWF run. There's a lot there for a Slaughter bio, and I'm trying to think. I think they're doing one on DDP. I don't have all the subjects in front of me, but yeah, depending on the subject. Scott Hall is one as well.
Roman Reigns, Davey Boy Smith, it looks like on this graphic here.
Right. Okay. So those are all coming up in the near weeks. And another interesting note is that if you are in the US, you don't even need A&E on your cable system. You can log on to A&E's site, and there's no sign up. You can just stream A&E on your laptop. And I said to myself, damn it, I wish I lived in the US. And then I realized there's a way that I can still view this and live in Canada. Wai, can you tell me more?
It is 2024, and tracking technology from advertisers, ISPs, and hackers is getting more sophisticated than many of us can understand. Something you can do to give yourself a bit more peace of mind this year is to protect your browsing by investing in a trusted VPN like NordVPN. Voted Best VPN for Privacy of 2023 by Security.org, Nord is one of the most established and reputable VPN providers in the field. NordVPN is also something I use every day to access geo-blocked online streaming services like AEW+. By far the best way of watching AEW programming commercial-free with on-demand access to AEW's entire TV archive. But perhaps the most value I've gained from using Nord has been the ability to unlock cheaper prices to online content from other parts of the world. And from now until March 20th, when you sign up at nordvpn.com/postwrestling, receive 4 bonus months at discount pricing on all 2-year plans. Plus, users in the US, Canada, UK, and Australia receive an Uber Eats voucher valued from $10 to $30 with their standard, plus, complete, or ultimate plan. Again, that's nordvpn.com/postwrestling. Sign up for as low as $2.91 a month and enjoy some free Uber Eats, along with all the benefits of a premium VPN like Nord's. Best one yet.
Damn.
Bravo.
You know what? Dynamite we go. Huntsville, Alabama. WrestleTix reporting 3,143.
How did you watch Dynamite tonight, by the way?
NordVPN, dude. Wai has hooked me up with this thing. It's a game changer. Okay. I will sound like a shill stating this, but man, what I was doing before was just I couldn't do it anymore. And now it's
So you watched on Fight commercial free.
Yes, commercial free. It's a real different tone during the commercials. Like when Taz is on commercial, dude just flips. Like he knows what my picture-in-picture material is, and then when we're back on the broadcast, there's a very noticeable. Like they just let their hair down during the breaks.
They're far more looser when they're off air. I mean, they need to kind of rest at that point too, right? And they're not just kind of like but they're not talking, but the energy is certainly lower. They're a little bit more playful with each other, and they know, I guess, what they're talking
it's
about.
like a director's commentary for your fan base that is going out of their way for this kind of a service. Like you're getting more than just traditional commentary. Like it's a lot looser feel, but it's very distinct. Like when they come back from break and the tonal change. So yeah, it was announced over 3,100 tickets distributed. I will say up until like Flair and Sting arrives, you could have told me there were 15 people in this arena at times. This was one of the least heated Dynamites I think ever. It was so quiet for some periods.
But it didn't really hit me, maybe more so until like the women's match at 9:30. But I suppose
the opening trios match, there were like just some dead periods, and you've got like 6 stars in this match. I was like, it wasn't even a case to me of the crowd being burned out. Like I sensed it right from the beginning. And I don't think we're at the period where Dynamite, like the crowds are just such a huge part of the show like they were in years past, but not like this. I just thought this was a really, really low energy crowd. And it affected the show in several of the matches. But we're out to start with Hangman Page, who comes out on his crutch. And they show the footage of last week of his counter to the Muscle Buster landing on the ankle. This guy did a great job. And he's on the floor, and we come back into the ring, and he gives this heartfelt speech about when AEW started, it was my chance to rise to people's expectations. And I thought I did that by winning the title in 2022. It's still the biggest accomplishment of my career. I didn't want it to be a 3-way for the title, but I cannot compete this Sunday. And the crowd is all sad. Swerve comes out, talks about how they've gone to war over the past 6 months, and I might have crossed the line a few times, including your doorstep. I mean, that was quite the line he crossed. But he didn't expect this to happen and targeted Page because of what you've accomplished, and I do respect you. You can't escape fate, and you can't stop destiny, and my destiny is becoming champion this Sunday. Before Page can respond, Samoa Joe is out to speak some truth and says, I'm the real man around here. Hangman, or should I say hop along, both of you are hungry, but you're also accomplished wrestlers. But the only reason that you're hungry is because I'm starving your ass. And there will be no more meals come dinner time as long as I'm champion, and I'm going to whip one or both of your asses. Swerve explains, I went from being unemployed to headlining pay-per-views, goes over his attack at Buddy Wayne's school, breaking into another man's career, and I'm a career maker and a career changer. Joe, maybe you can go back to commentary wearing a poncho. And Swerve is on the verge of making history on Sunday. And with that, Hangman is standing behind him and nails him with the crutch. He reveals he's fine and says that Swerve will never be champion. I thought this segment was great.
It was fantastic. And I mean, nothing will really touch Mark Henry's, pink salmon jacket in terms of sort of sentimental, emotional, babyface promo leading to a Swerve. But I thought Page did a really great job, and I think it would have been that much better had everything maybe gone as planned and we didn't know that this was a work going into it. I almost feel like I don't fault reporting, like it's the job of a reporter. I almost wish Jerry Lynn didn't confirm that it was a work when he complained about the reporting. And we could have all at least, bought into the speculation that much more. Whatever. It's hard to get around it. We can only maybe appreciate it for what they were intending on doing. And I thought the intent was wonderful. Down from Hangman's sell of it all yet last week, telling the camera people not to shoot him, to everything that they built it today. Like Page did a really, really great job here.
I thought you could argue this is the best thing on the show. I thought it was a really strong segment for the night.
And it's, we already know Page is a heel at this point, but this again continues to further cement that, and it continues to babyface the home invader, Swerve, who, I mean, we all just don't mind. He really wanted the championship, so we could really forget the home invasion.
Now, the one thing I will say is that, okay, if this was his master plan,
Swerve's?
No,
Well,
Hangman's Page. He comes out into the ring. Is he so confident that Swerve is going to come out here?
These things tend to work out.
He was just left out there. It's like, okay, am I out of the pay-per-view? Did I just talk myself out of this?
These things usually tend to work out. Yeah.
Well, good for him. The plan worked to perfection. The Young Bucks arrive earlier in the day. They run into Renee, and she asks him about the meeting with Ric Flair. Nick says it went great, and they can't wait to see Sting tonight and thank him for all his contributions and conduct his exit interview as they show off their white bats. And that would send them for hours looking for this man. Their last stop of the night ends up being his dressing room that is labeled Sting. But before that, they checked every ounce of this building.
It's a big building.
I guess so. There's actually a great moment. You could barely even hear him, but when Matt gets out of the vehicle when they arrive, it's just so subtle under his breath where he's just like, this place sucks. And it was just a great, I had to like rewind it. It was so hard to decipher. It made it even better. Moxley, Danielson, and Claudio against Eddie Kingston and FTR. Danielson tries unsuccessfully to start a "he's a bum" chant at Eddie Kingston. Did not get over. The BCC work over Cash Wheeler. Then they work over Dax Harwood for a long period. And this was when the crowd was just on their hands. And thus this was a little just...
So a lot of what you're watching might be through commercial break as well, where the action is not going to be as exciting.
Well, the audience was, I'll say consistent here. This was definitely during the break because as Moxley gets a figure four applied, Dax reverses it, grabbing the rope. So Taz gives us an anecdote of a time when a guy was trying to get out of a submission of Taz's. So he stuck his pinky finger up the nostril of Taz. And it was at this moment that I became a lifelong subscriber for NordVPN. I will never miss a picture-in-picture anecdote from Taz. Kingston and Danielson then come in and they get into this huge chopping exchange. Moxley is in, Kingston pops up. They're going at it with big strikes and the action is intensifying. And then we get the giant swing drop kick combo to Eddie Kingston, followed by a pile driver. Eddie is motionless, but Dax makes the save. And we get a procession of different moves here. The Hurricane to Danielson, Steinerizer by FTR onto Kingston. They go for the cover. Both Claudio and Mox dive in. All six men are down, and we've got the BCC each going to apply a submission. And then the baby faces get to their feet, rapid fire chops onto the BCC members, and they hit the shatter machine on Claudio. He rolls out. Dax is hit with a brainbuster, Danielson with a Busaiku, and then a shoulder capture suplex. It comes down to Danielson with Kingston, and he stomps the head of Eddie Kingston before applying the triangle and starts flexing like he's Nate Diaz as Eddie Kingston goes out. This one went 21 minutes and 53 seconds. So Danielson submits Eddie Kingston, who passes out to set us into the pay-per-view match on Sunday.
I find it like pretty unusual to see such a clean, dominant finish of a babyface heading into a pay-per-view. There is no cheating at all involved in this finish, but it works really well for this particular storyline. I mean, this was like the type of thing that was almost very deflating for a crowd that wasn't really that lively to begin with. But I thought the finish itself was a perfect setup for the type of storytelling that they're trying to present here of Eddie Kingston and his self-confidence heading into this match with Danielson. Danielson calling him a bum. I thought it was the type of finish that really set up the stakes for how important it is for Eddie to beat Danielson so that he can answer, these sort of self-destructive criticisms. I really like the match, and maybe it's for that reason that I was so enamored with the action itself that I didn't really notice the crowd as much. But I think the BCC are just simply such a great heel trios team where their style and pace are just relentless and just so much fun to watch, So even if Brian enters a part-time schedule, I hope these three at least don't break up from this group and that we occasionally get these matches maybe into their 50s and even 60s.
I want to see Danielson and Atlantis Senior. That's what I want.
That could be fun too.
Yeah, no, it was a good match. It to me overcame the crowd. Part of the story, and they were explaining this in the match, is that Eddie Kingston is not the same guy he was even 4 years ago. He is someone that can now control his anger and his self-doubt. And I think doing a finish like this, I hope Saturday we get a promo from Eddie Kingston where now he has been shaken. He is doubting himself after such a decisive loss, after he's been on this big roll, and the guy who has been this elusive capture for him submits him in this way. And you could get this, Eddie Kingston doubting himself. And I mean, I hope he gets like 5 minutes on Saturday to really emphasize that.
It's got, I mean, it already has, I think, been a pretty well told story, but it's got the potential to be, taken that much further the day before the pay-per-view. So we hope for a big Eddie Kingston promo.
Danielson also looks into the camera saying that Eddie Kingston is getting choked out on Sunday. We saw CMLL footage of Chris Jericho as Corazón de León and explaining that Atlantis was his mentor, and he requested this match with Atlantis Jr., that he is going to do the same for him that Atlantis did for him 30 years ago in CMLL. So Jericho is interviewed here, explains being thrown into the deep end by Paco Alonso, and that Atlantis was a mentor and a friend, and he's going to give Atlantis Jr. a lesson in violence tonight.
I think there was a really nice little story that set up the reason for this particular match. Ideally, you would get an interview segment and a video package like this maybe the week ahead to really maximize some of the anticipation and some online buzz that you might be able to attract for it. But overall, I mean, it was still a positive to see.
Shivani welcomed Will Ospreay, who has finished his obligations with New Japan, went to Barbados for 10 years with the missus and got pissed. Lost his bags.
10 days.
10 days, yes. And then they found his bags. And look at me. I look like Kermit the Frog on leg day in my green tracksuit. This is like the most, like, Ospreay has become a very charismatic individual, but this was him. This was as much him coming out and saying, I am ready for weekly American television, this segment. He said that he's here for full-time work, goes over his wins against Orange Cassidy, Kenny Omega, and Chris Jericho in AEW. And then out comes the Callis family, and they're all booed. Don Callis says this is going to be the match of the decade with the two best in the world. It's like Jordan Pippen going hard at practice, but coming together to win championships. It doesn't matter who wins. The Callis family wins, and asks the two to shake hands, but there's tension between them going into this match, and the fans are chanting for Ospreay, not for Takeshita. And that was our setup here for what should be an incredible match on Sunday.
Yeah. I thought Ospreay came across really well here. There might have been some questions about whether or not what we've seen out of him on the microphone in New Japan would have directly translated to weekly American television. I don't think there's really any question about it at this point. Like, the man has come such a long way in terms of charisma to the point where I think he immediately comes into AEW feeling so fully formed and so sure of himself, and he's got such a unique voice and I think a real interesting, comfortable playfulness with the crowd as well, that I really do wonder how he developed it, especially not really being given that same level of mic time in New Japan, for instance. But he comes in feeling immediately like a top player that you could do a whole lot of different storytelling for on AEW. And I mean, obviously presented as a babyface clearly here, and somebody who, even though he's associated with the Callis family, wasn't exactly, nodding in agreement with every single one of Don Callis's words. So expect the breakup to happen at Revolution, if not maybe further teasing for a bigger, moment of a breakup down the road.
How many people have to leave the Callis family before they have to redo that painting for the entrance, which does feature both Will Ospreay and Sammy Guevara?
Right. And Kyle Fletcher, who at least at this point might be facing some visa issues or something. I mean, Photoshop is, a great tool these days. It's very advanced.
Renee is with Eddie Kingston, but he doesn't even get a word out because the Young Bucks are on their hunt for Sting and don't realize they've walked into a live shot. And Nick threatens Kingston for talking crap on Collision and inform him, maybe you can work on the presentation. And they talk about the potential of adding a dress code. And Taz mentions, I was part of a dress code. It's not fun.
Is that in reference to something?
WWE.
Dress code as in like him as a commentator, or just in general there was a dress
No,
code?
it was like everybody, with like the exception of The Undertaker, had to abide by the dress code in WWE.
Which was what did they have to wear?
They had to, it was like business casual, and it was like no matter who you were outside of like there was
Except
very
the
few
Undertaker. So a Taker could have worn what, like a motorcycle jacket, t-shirt.
Taker could wear his attire that could both be considered work attire and I'm attending a Kid Rock concert attire.
Okay. All right.
Renee, then we go to Orange Cassidy and Nick Wayne for the International Championship with the Patriarchy in Nick Wayne's corner. And Nick Wayne hit a Tope Con Hero across the ring over the corner. And Cassidy is thrown into the step, so he would sell his back throughout the entire match. Wayne is doing the Orange Cassidy kicks before Cassidy pops up and just super kicks him, nails him with his PK. And then Wayne ducks an orange punch, lands the German, and then gets leaps up and gets caught by a beach break for a 2 count. There's a big pop here after Christian Cage crotches Cassidy, and Bryce asks, did he just fall? And then ejects the entire Patriarchy, which, I mean, this crowd, they loved it. Huntsville, they were here for Sting. They were here for ejections. Those were 2 things on their docket for tonight. But then Taven and Bennett appear ringside. Wayne capitalizes with a dragon suplex. So Rocky and Trent run down. And as Wayne exposes the turnbuckle, Daniel Garcia appears. If you're keeping track of this, Daniel Garcia distracts Nick Wayne. He turns around and is hit with the orange punch, and Orange Cassidy retains in 11 minutes. A lot of people involved here. But before I could even write that, Roderick Strong ran in and attacked Orange Cassidy and gets sent off by Rocky Romero and Trent Beretta.
Finish was definitely a bit convoluted and almost groan-inducing, but maybe I give them a little bit more leeway, seeing this is a go-home show, and the end result of all of these matches is to take us towards the pay-per-view, and they tried to do both of them here, both the Cassidy match as well as the Garcia versus Christian match here in one go. Big takeaway for me in this match was just how incredible Nick Wayne is. I mean, that's really no surprise, but it's a reminder that at 18, he is already this good. He's moving so well. Now he's showing, I think, a lot of added.
He's doing all the posing after the moves now.
Yeah.
They're
a lot of added
emphasizing
charisma as a heel, and he's immediately got this like very smarmy, sort of like cocky, overconfident attitude that I'm really buying into. I think being a heel has been really, really good for him under Christian. So it felt like this was a match designed to really showcase him, and I thought they were totally successful with it.
Renee is with the Bang Bang Scissor Gang, and Jay White is now all in on this group, and they make a joke about Max Caster if anyone noticed the rap on Saturday, which was a very painful live television moment, and just owned it and joked about it. And we're going to get Austin Gunn and the Acclaim teaming up on Saturday's Collision.
Yeah. And Austin has kind of been doing a thing where he's suggesting these sort of teams, and they keep ignoring him or thinking that they're bad ideas, while they basically suggest the same teams and they all love it, or somebody else suggests anyway.
Yeah, it was Austin suggesting Austin Gunn and the Acclaimed, and Bowen said, what about the Acclaimed and Austin Gunn?
Sure, yes. We all know where this is headed. It's a feud between these 2 factions. It's just like they did with MJF and Cole, but man, I have not really found the dynamic between these 6 nearly as interesting. And maybe that just comes down to like the lack of creativity in these sort of backstage interview segments. Like this is the type of group that I think are made for outside vignettes or something like that. As corny as going to the Chinese restaurant was for like MJF and Cole, I think it fits the tone of these 6 perfectly, but they just kind of give us this every single week, and I haven't really been that enthused by it all.
Kris Statlander and Skye Blue. This is the rubber match between them with a win apiece. And Kris does a headstand in the corner, like she's Ultimo Dragon here, and gets just shoved to the apron and knocked off. But then Statlander lifts her up for this military press and just walks across the floor and dumps her onto a bunch of fans. This was a great spot. And we go to the break. Blue comes back, goes for a cover after a neck breaker, and they're fighting on the edge when Statlander ends up hitting a German suplex onto Blue. Julia Hart is checking on her and then stares at Statlander. So Willow Nightingale steps up to Julia And then there's a drop toe hold by Blue that sends Kris into the steps, follows with a Canadian Destroyer and super kick in the ring, then an inside cradle for a 2 count. Statlander hits the Iconoclasm, and then Hathaway shows off a chain and offers it to Statlander, but Willow's telling her, don't use it. But in the distraction, Statlander turns around and Julia Hart is there with a belt shot, and the referee is dealing with Stokely. So it leads to the code blue, and Skye Blue wins in 9 minutes and 40 seconds with the idea that Stokely Hathaway keeps screwing up when he's trying to help.
Yes. I thought the match was really good between these two. You know, they were very smooth in there. I think they both have really interesting movesets. It was hard hitting. And Heat, as usual, you know, for a 9:30 match with the women's mid-card division, it was not that strong, maybe especially so given this particular crowd. But the match itself, I thought was really, really good. And I think they could use more support, as a lot of the mid-card can, in the form of like airtime out of the ring on Dynamite, similar to, again, a lot of the mid-card.
Yeah, this is largely this Stokely, Kris Statlander, Willow stuff's been playing out on Collision and Rampage. I thought they were going to be going the other way here and setting up Statlander and Julia Hart potentially for just as an additional match for Sunday, but not going that way. This match was so impressive. It also was the subject of the Intuit TurboTax move of the night, which was the belt shot and code blue, a much safer move of the night.
A bit of a better choice this week. Yeah.
The Young Bucks continue their search and they arrive at Sting's dressing room. What an idea. Matt stops Nick before they enter, reminding him that Sting sounded crazy angry last week. So let's be mindful. And they open up this room that is full of bats hanging from the ceiling, which I guess which was a foreboding for what was to descend from the ceiling later.
You think Sting took the effort to, I don't know,
I think he
string up
flew
all
in
these
at least
bats?
a night early to Huntsville to do his like paper mache, setting up. Like this would have been. This is an easy like 2-hour job.
Oh yeah, no doubt. You got to
Just
make
getting
sure.
all these bats. Like, where do you go and get like, you know, Costco is not selling you like a, you know, team bats.
They're not selling like black baseball bats either. So you probably have
No.
to spray paint them. Had to like, you know,
Definitely.
buy your fishing line, hook them, put the red light, splash the red light up there.
On Friday, they are plugging the Countdown to Revolution will feature never before seen footage of Sting in New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Yeah. So I guess we'll find out how much footage they managed to grab of Sting from various places. There might have.
Various places in New Japan. That's it, Way.
I wonder if TNA, you know, TNA is also a place where
Yep,
they can hit up.
Yeah, TNA. I'm sure TNA could lend them some stuff. Maybe whatever Memphis is out there that they could maybe track down. And that's about
Was
it.
he in any other promotion throughout his career?
I mean, not that is not owned the libraries. Like when you go through Mid-South, Jim Crockett Promotions and WCW. I mean, that's the lion's share. But you're right about TNA. Like that, it's just like so much of like what you would consider nostalgic Sting footage. You're not thinking of TNA. You're thinking of Surfer Sting. You're thinking of, you know, 80s and early 90s a lot, and they're not going to have access to that beyond this New Japan stuff.
Well, they might have to just rely a lot on still photos from Mike Lano. Shout out Mike Lano.
Dr. Mike Lano.
Yeah.
Mike Andrea. Yeah.
There might have been at least some speculation from people wondering if they had negotiated something with the WWE because of this poster that they created to promote one of these shows, whether or not it's tonight. I can't really bring it up right now, but it did show still footage of certain matches. Now, these could be photos as well from like his WCW run. But it would really surprise me if like they got any sort of WCW rights.
We'll see. You know, the AEW, they did when they did that John Cena appreciation night. I mean, AEW did make available, you know, several performers. If you were going to, you know, cash in a favor for that, this would be the time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Jericho against Atlantis Jr. Atlantis Jr. is out with the historic light heavyweight championship with his 61-year-old father in his corner. And Jericho is out and he is pretty much playing Chris Jericho of like 1992 here. And Jericho gets the walls on, but Atlantis Jr. makes it to the rope. And then Jericho starts trying to undo his mask. and gets kicked away. And then he goes over and is caught by Atlantis, who puts the towel around Jericho's neck to choke him on the rope. I did not sense that Jericho's life was in danger here with this choke.
Well, he choked him like around the back of the neck too.
Yeah, it was
It's more of a massage than a...
I was gonna say, like, this was, it felt like more like a mid-ring adjustment that he was getting, like mid-match. So then they go to the floor, and Atlantis Jr. sets up the steps and goes to lift Jericho for a power bomb. Take two. He lifted him again. If I'm Jericho, I'm like, you know what? Let's ixnay this one. But it was not a power bomb spot. Instead, he was just reversing it to send Atlantis Jr. into the steps. But then Jr. counters a superplex, lands the frog splash. They trade big chops, and then there's a wheelbarrow German by Atlantis Jr. for a 2 count. And Taz explains, you know, I tried that suplex back in the day. It's not a great suplex because you're really low on the guy so that when you drop him, you're not doing much damage. I'm not trying to bury him. I'm just saying. They're like, yeah. We understand. I love this. This is great. So then Jericho, they're on the turnbuckle and he hits this like face buster off the top, which they tie back to the video package that aired and utilizing this move on Atlantis back in their heyday. So this was a callback spot. This was funny. Like the crowd was not that crazy for this. And they're very quiet. And then like Atlantis Jr. just like signals to them and they start like, this is awesome. It's like, say something. Yeah. Okay, we've got this.
So like this happens in like wrestling where their crowds are quiet for like an entire match and then they might break into a "this is awesome" chant. And I mean, it, you know,
like they've made it to 8 minutes. Let's give them their due.
Or it could just simply be a crowd that maybe was a bit more sparse and maybe not as vocal during downtimes that were actually into the match. We just couldn't really tell. Or they could have just been, you know, upon sort of like prompt reacted to whatever they were asked.
Atlantis Jr. ducks the Judas effect, gets him up for the Atlantita, and it's countered. Jericho lands on the feet and applies the walls, pulls him into the center away from the rope, and his father throws in the towel at 12 minutes and 6 seconds. Jericho gets the victory here and then holds up Atlantis, and Atlantis Jr. checks on him, hugs Atlantis Sr., and that was it. There was no like post-match angle or anything like that. Just kind of a match that they explained that Jericho requested, and I'm sure that was legit. That was probably the whole story to this was just a match Jericho wanted to have, and that was that.
It felt very much like a one-off, like on its own island type of match for Chris Jericho that had nothing at all to do with anything else going on in AEW or Revolution. I don't think Jericho is even on. Well, he's in the Meat Madness,
the scramble, yeah.
Which is no longer Meat Madness.
No, due to injuries, it's now just Madness. It's a scramble match, no meat. That'll be delayed.
It's a vegetarian Madness. Wait, who's injured?
I mean, Tony Khan did not state, but I guess I assumed Keith Lee was going to be in that match. Okay. We never get status updates on these people, but the match is now an all-star 8-man scramble with Jericho, Hobbs, Wardlow, Archer, Hook. Does not qualify as meat.
I mean, I would classify. He wrestles like a meat guy.
Okay. Brian Cage, and then 2 others to qualify. One being the winner of Magnus, not Brutus Magnus, and Matt Sydal, which has already been taped and will air on Rampage. You can read the winner. And then Saturday's Collision will have Penta, Dante Martin, and Brian Keith in a 3-way for the last spot. And thus, Shawn Stasiak is not going to have a spot on this. Because if they had left the Mystery Man for Sunday, that's why I'm not booking wrestling, because that would have been my call.
So
it's not Madness. So really, you got to save that for the Meat Madness match itself.
Save Meat Madness for a bigger show.
Maybe he was the one that wasn't available. They're like, we can do this without Keith Lee, but we're not doing Meat Madness without Shawn Stasiak.
So I'm actually in contact with somebody who runs into Shawn Stasiak regularly at his local gym. And Sean Stasiak, we know, has at least tried to campaign for it on social media to be a part of this Meat Madness match. And
Oh, really?
I mean, I don't know if they're willing to listen, nor do I know if he's an active wrestler in any capacity at this point. But that's the update. Just maybe going back to this Jericho match, crowd reactions for it were really not that big whatsoever. And I don't know if the match was really all that impressive, despite the, this is awesome chant. Like, I feel like we have sort of a standard for these luchadors from CMLL. And I thought Atlantis looked maybe a lot slower and honestly a little bit average without the wow factor. What it had going for it, though, was the history and depth of this story. But because it all happened, I think, relatively quickly, I don't know if there was enough time to convey, like, maybe the significance of all of this for a greater audience, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, there was certainly like a story to this match that you had. I thought the match that they had a lot of good ideas here. Some of the execution was off at times. Like, again, I thought it was a fine match for like just a television match for what it was. And then for Rampage, you've got Seidel and Magnus, and then Ruido against Claudio Castagnoli. So these were again taped on Saturday after Collision because they were doing Collision tonight, the tapings, because there is not a Saturday taping that they're doing the night before. Collision's got the three-way we mentioned. Tony Storm and Deonna Purrazzo will appear, and then another 8-man. It's Orange Cassidy, Trent Hook, and Daniel Garcia against Christian Cage, Brian Cage, Roderick Strong, and Killswitch. The two Cages together.
Bound to happen at some point. Man, this Excalibur rundown was
dude, they made it so hard for him because he had to go from pay-per-view to TV, pay-per-view, TV, and he's trying. Now we morph over to the pay-per-view. Like,
this dude had to get into, like,
they made it so confusing.
He had to get into a DeLorean to try to, get this entire rundown out. And they're trying something new. They're trying to contain all the storylines within their own sort of segment. So if you're talking about Orange Cassidy, you're going to talk about the best friends or a 6-man or whatever on Collision before you continue with the Revolution rundown. But it just didn't work. It completely tripped Excalibur up, and it made a really tough job already that much more difficult, I thought.
Yeah, this would be an example of just overthinking these plugs. Like, you're just telling people, tune in Friday, this is what you're going to see. Saturday, this is what you're going to see. And hopefully people can put the pieces together. Final minutes of the match, of the show. It's all built around Sting's final Dynamite, which Tony Khan did stipulate. It is his last Dynamite as an active performer, that he will likely make many more appearances in the future. Young Bucks come out, and there's some fans with Sting masks on. You know where this is going. Darby Allin is one of the fans and nails the Young Bucks, but they take over after a PK from Nick, and they attack with the bats. They hit him with the EVP trigger and wave down Ric Flair to come down. And you think Rick is going to attack Darby Allin, but instead pokes Nick in the eyes, attacks Matt, and a low blow is delivered to Ric Flair, and they beat him down. So Ric Flair is, Jesus Christ, look at this. Ric Flair is back as a babyface in time for Sunday. And then Sting's music plays, and the place goes nuts. And they walk up the ramp, the Bucks do, to await Sting's arrival, but he repels from the ceiling. And he comes down, and Sting attacks them with his bat. Darby hits a coffin drop to the floor and a scorpion death drop to Nick. Ends the show, sending people into the retirement match on Sunday.
Yeah, we got a Sting repel spot here. I would assume for the very last time in the man's life. And I still feel relatively uneasy about seeing something like this to this day. But for like
it's not even watching this way that, like, I have a concern that they're doing this like dangerously. Like, I'm sure it's very safe. It's just, I don't think if I just cannot ever watch this and it's not taking you back to such a horrible memory that, but to that end though, tons of people enjoyed this as a nostalgic bit with Sting. The crowd enjoyed it. So I certainly imagine I'm not representative of the whole, that instantly and forever I will only think of Owen Hart when I see this, but that's not for everyone.
It was the same reaction I had. But listening to the reaction tonight, I
They went
don't
wild
think
for this. And
yeah.
online, people were really into this. Like this is a very iconic version of Sting that
Mhm.
everyone equates with the character from a golden period in wrestling.
I totally get it. It looked really cool, got a great reaction, and it really was kind of the draw of, or at least like the main sort of like thing you come out of the segment with. This didn't necessarily advance the story or build on that much heat in any sort of way, but you got to see Sting repel from the rafters one last time. Everything that they did with Ric Flair in this entire run felt like a total waste of time. He added nothing at all to any of these segments, nor any of the intrigue for these matches. I think if you had suggested like him actually playing heel so that there was a promise of some sort of interaction between Sting and Flair at the pay-per-view, that might have been something. But this just kind of like it didn't. What
If
is a
anything,
promise?
you would have thought they would have saved the spot for the pay-per-view, and the fact they got it out of the way here tells me like he's going to have a minuscule like role.
Yeah.
Like I imagine they're just going to have a lot of guests in the crowd that are, contemporaries of Sting, and Flair being one of them. Like that's the only role I see him for Sunday. Like if you're going to do physicality with Flair, I'm not doing it on the TV beforehand if I have something for the pay-per-view planned. So I don't think the match needs it. I agree with you. I don't think this lead up has been anything like I don't see Flair having added too much to this whole build up.
He
Like,
brought them. I think he brought the company a lot of criticism, actually. But like Tony says, it cost them nothing because all they had to do was put the energy drinks on the desk. But still, I don't think he added really anything at all to the Sting run.
So that was Dynamite. As a go home show, like I didn't think this was like one of the stronger Dynamites. I really enjoyed the opening segment. I think, the end, this crowd was here for Sting. And I think that this is like this pay-per-view on paper. It looks like it could be one of the best AEW shows. There is a lot on this show, but it's going to be the Sting retirement that is like where this show does. If anything above like your normal like 135,000 number, like anything above that, it's all on the Sting retirement. And I have no idea what the upper bound limit could be. That it's not like you're just the day of the show. Do I want to watch a great wrestling show? You're going to get a great wrestling show, but is it going to connect with people in the sense of, do I want to watch Sting's last match, believing it's the retirement, and you want to watch something of historical value as a wrestling fan?
It's one of those moments that promises to, like we talked about with the Ric Flair retirement match or the first, was supposed to be the retirement match against Shawn Michaels. I mean, it's one of those moments that transcends the fiction of professional wrestling. If you want to see Sting's last day on the job as a professional wrestler, you're going to pay a ticket to watch this, no matter how you might feel about AEW, no matter how you might feel about the WWE, whatever. If you are a fan who has at all respected this man's career, that this is why you would watch the show. And yeah, like all I need to know is that Braden and Davey are actually considering driving down to Greensboro to go to this live. That tells you, I think, everything you need to know about
drive.
Yes.
North Carolina is really far.
Yeah, they've calculated it 12 hours. And
that's not crazy.
They've spoken enough about it and they've tweeted enough about it that I think they're actually doing it. So that tells you all you need to know about the level of intrigue for Sting's retirement.
So here's the lineup for Sunday night. We've got the All-Star Scramble match. We mentioned the participants with 2 more to be added. FTR against Claudio Castagnoli and Jon Moxley. Christian Cage is taking on Daniel Garcia for the AEW TNT Championship. So they are going ahead with the one-on-one match. Last week we talked about the idea, if you want to hold off on Christian and Adam Copeland, you've got Big Business coming up. I also forgot the week after Big Business is the Toronto show as well. So I think it makes a lot of sense that, you have that match in your back pocket. And I like the fact they're doing Cage and Garcia on this.
I was just a bit surprised that you wouldn't have Adam Copeland on pay-per-view, for.
Yeah. There is that. It would also you would also look at this as like one of the lowest, this is Jericho just in another match. And this, Jericho might be your highest paid guy on this whole roster as well. Ospreay against Takeshita. I think they should open the pay-per-view. I would put it in that slot, and I think it would just be incredible.
Is it going to be the match of the decade?
That's quite the lofty title to put on anything, but that's, I guess if it's not, then it's a failure, right?
No, not at all. I mean,
like it might not be the match of the show. Who knows? We'll find out. Eddie Kingston and Bryan Danielson for the Continental Crown. Tony Storm against Deonna Purrazzo for the women's title. Samoa Joe, Swerve Strickland, Hangman for the AEW title. Orange Cassidy, Roderick Strong. They've made it 6 weeks of since the announced match.
I don't know why they announced it so early. Like, sure, whatever.
And then Sting and Darby against the Young Bucks. How do you see the retirement match ending?
I think Sting loses.
I think so too.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's wonderful sort of emotion to be had from a loss versus him winning, riding off in the sunset with the championship belts. I don't think that's as interesting to me creatively.
I think this is also going to be like a larger story for the Young Bucks that this is going to propel them for in terms of, you know, if you hear kind of their thought process of this angle, it's like taking AEW back to where it was and getting rid of somebody like a Sting, for instance. Like that's great heat for them. And it is also, it's more or less like where I see this one going. And I think that it would be, I think honestly, you can go either way here. You could do the feel good moment at the end, but I think ultimately you're going to get like the post-match, like retirement ceremony that I think is going to be the feel good aspect of it, regardless of whether he wins or loses. Curious
to see what names from the past might show up ringside, you know, to give us maybe some of that, some of those tiers. So do you have any predictions for like stunts? You know, like what level of Sting stunt are we going to
I'm not making any predictions for stunts.
Oh goodness. He looks, I'll just say Sting looks in great shape right now. Like what little, like we saw him in the tag match, Tornado Tag, like didn't look gassed in any part. Even the physicality we saw tonight, like he looked in really good shape, and I have no doubt he's going to look great on Sunday too. Do you have a prediction for match of the night?
I think this Ospreay Takeshita match is going to be great. Like the emotion is not going to be touched from the retirement match, but I think I just think Ospreay and Takeshita is going to be incredible. I mean, Kingston and Danielson looks excellent on paper. You've got the FTR Moxley Claudio match, Joe, Hangman, and Swerve.
That could be amazing.
For all we've said about the buildup, like Orange Cassidy and Roderick Strong should be incredible for what time they have. Like seriously, this has the potential to be one of the better AEW pay-per-views, which is a really, really high bar. But this, I think this lineup's incredible.
And there are only 9 matches, and I say only because I feel like it's not unusual for AEW to have a lot more than that. There's only one women's match on the show, so I could see them adding another women's match.
They haven't designated anything for the pre-show, have they?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Well, it's at 9 matches now. We will see if any are added to it. But we'll open it up now to your super chats and a couple of pieces of feedback as we close out the show.
We have a super chat here from Jake from the Windy City who sends $10. Thank you, Jake, for the support. He says, what would be your go-to Sting matches? I love the Flair draw at the first Clash of Champions, obviously. I have a soft spot for this match for his match against AJ in TNA Bound for Glory 2009 as well.
I would lean towards the Vader matches in the early 90s. I thought those two just had really great chemistry. It was Sting. I thought always his best opponents were big men, and Vader was, I thought, his best opponent in that category. Yes, you have the Flair matches from a significant standpoint. I mean, that was the match that really put him on the map in 1988. But those Vader matches, like that was a very low period for WCW, but I just thought they always had terrific chemistry together. Those would be some, like with Muta, like he certainly had some very good matches with him as well. And then, the TNA run is one where I think you focus a lot on his like character stuff, but it was like he was in there with Kurt, he was in there with AJ. I mean, he was in there with like a lot of guys that you kind of had a sense of this guy that was, you know, working to a much younger generation of opponents, and that's been only heightened now going to AEW, where he's got just, you know, the New Jack run in him.
I don't really have any go-to Sting matches. He was never really my guy, so to speak. I would recommend people listen to Best Match Ever from Braden and Davey with Nate Milton talking about Sting if you want maybe a bit more of a comprehensive discussion about that. But he's always been just sort of a name that's been around. My dad suggested changing my name to S so that I could be Sting. If you remember that story.
I do, yes.
He's always been around, but like I've never really kind of looked at him as like an incredible sort of work rate type of guy where I'd say, oh, I really have to I really remember this match. I really want to go back and watch it. Not in the way that I look at somebody like a Brett, for instance. But I respect the man's very, very long and very influential career.
All right, let's go to some feedback. We'll start off with Andrew from Cape Breton. I wasn't much of a WWF fan than a WCW fan when I was a kid, but it was really cool seeing Sting come down from the rafters. I also wear a harness for my work, and he looked to have a nice one on under the trench coat. I'm really looking forward to the pay-per-view. I feel that Meat Madness Scramble match may have been Tony changing his mind instead of the injury story, as it makes more sense to add different types of people into the match and not restrict yourself to large men, so it's for the best. I was also impressed with Kris Statlander and Skye Blue. I've seen both have some bad matches before, but they really brought it. Overall, a great episode.
Let's go to Cody from Maine, who says, not a home run, but a solid final Dynamite before the pay-per-view. I'm a bit disappointed in the Meat Madness shakeup, but I'm sure the scramble will be fun and hectic. Perhaps as hectic as Excalibur's rundown tonight. That poor man. The main event segment perfectly showcased the beautiful stupidity of wrestling. Why would Sting allow Darby to be beaten down by the Bucks? Why would Sting allow Flair to be beaten down by the Bucks? Who cares? He repelled from the rafters, and I cheered like I was 6 years old again. It was awesome. I'm excited to make the journey down to Greensboro to be a part of the send-off to one of the biggest legends in the industry. It's been said many times over the last few years, but I'm so thankful that Sting has gotten this final run. It would have been an absolute shame to have such a legendary career and the way it could have after the buckle bomb in WWE.
Muggin writes, the go home was a love letter to all things Sting on the eve of his impending swan song. The closing segment with him descending from the rafters to bail Darby out was cool. Hangman worked Huntsville with feigning his ankle injury, completing the double turn with Swerve. Ospreay is clearly on his way out of the Callis clan. The opening six-man was great fun with BCC getting the necessary heat heading into their respective matches in Greensboro.
Let's go to Ani, who says, the build to Revolution has been very good and easily AEW's best build to a pay-per-view in at least over a year. They've maneuvered a lot of wrestlers into positions that should reap dividends long-term. Very good booking. However, I don't think much of these Young Bucks characters outside the angle where they beat Sting and his son's bloody. This Bucks versus the old-timer shtick has been played out for many a year and is now just tired and boring. All their meta jabs also come across as shallow when the fiction itself isn't that strong. I also thought the ending angle where Sting let his friends get beaten up before descending from the rafters was contrived and had me rolling my eyes. Bucks didn't sell the surprise well either. Swing and a miss on that angle.
Boy, yeah, did not enjoy this. I mean, how much control are you in to decide when you can repel?
I would hope complete control if you're going to descend. You think it's timed to only go off at a certain...
Well, I'm just saying there's a lot of preparation that goes into this. You can't just be reacting to an improvised attack on Darby Allin.
You're saying while Darby was getting beaten up, Flair was getting beaten up, Sting was getting up there, like getting properly shackled and safety tests and all that.
He didn't know that this attack would be going on. He was just going to make an appearance.
I'll say like the whole episode in regards to like what Sting was doing, what the Bucks were doing, looking for Sting all throughout the episode, going to various rooms, felt very WCW Nitro to me. Like we're gonna go through the backstage.
It would have been
area.
Really WCW Nitro if when Nick or Matt looked into that mirror and he saw Sting's reflection, but Nick couldn't see it.
I mean, we're approaching that sort of territory with the bats hanging, in Sting's dressing room, like kind of over the top. Maybe it was done in tribute. Maybe it was just sort of like a self-aware corniness. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. But even the final segment, maybe a few plot holes that you could have pointed to it in the same way that you could have a WCW closing segment.
We still had the announcers, though, mention that a camera crew is following the Young Bucks around. What egomaniacs.
Brandon Cutler.
Yeah, to explain. All right, that is going to wrap up the show. So coming up over the next couple of days on Friday, we are going to have a new edition of Post Pro Res, WH Park. Boy, I can't wait to hear his thoughts on the state of New Japan Pro Wrestling. That's coming up on Friday with Karen Peterson. And going into New Japan Cup season, they will be covering all things, not just New Japan. I'm sure they will be covering everything across the country of Japan. Then on Friday night, Wai and I are back right after SmackDown. SmackDown sold out. You can tune into Rewind-A-SmackDown sold out with us too, as we will be going through that show and taking your calls as well. That's for members at postwrestlingcafe.com. Then on Saturday, we've got an edition of Collision Course with Bruce Lord filling in for John Cena, joining Kate from Montreal. And we will be up minutes after Revolution on Sunday night for everybody.
A whole lot of stuff. It's a very busy weekend this week, but yeah. You want to drive to Greensboro?
No. I'm going to watch it here on nordvpn.com/postwrestling. Good night.